Hi everyone. John's muted, but he's just gone
Yeah,
off of mute.
I'll try again, Jane. The sort of schoolboy error. I was just saying, people, that this is our protest against nationalism. We're not going to start our own nation. We're just going to go straight to the red flag and start with the discussion. Welcome, everybody. It's so lovely to see you. My God, Neil, you've got glasses.
I didn't want to feel the odd one out.
Well, yes, with the glasses crew, we'll have team glasses, and so that's good to see. Anyway, I'll get back to the job. Police have to get Claire. We welcome somebody new this week. Kirsty, hiya.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me on. I feel so privileged.
No, the privilege is ours. I always ask new members to tell us a bit about themselves. Who are you? Where do you come from? What do you do?
I'm an activist from Lincoln in Lincolnshire. Nobody knows where that is, so we always say it's a little bit across from Nottingham. Been an online activist for going on 13 years, 12 years, 13 years. I first got into it and I'm still sort of into it now. There just doesn't seem to be a period where there isn't something that we've got to fight against. So yeah, that's me and what I'm up to.
Great to have you on the show. Thank you so much. But of course, I would never sort of fail to welcome our resident brainbox, Jane Strange. Welcome, Jane. And of course, Neil, it's always lovely to have you with or without your glasses. Let's move straight on. Neil, I know you've got a great moment of the week.
Yeah, well, I had to search around for one because I had two that I was going to do, but they're both going to be discussed later on as part of the programme. So my moment of the week is a report that came out this week revealing that that revision banks are being set up across the country, in particular in the poorer, more deprived areas of the country. Now, revision banks are places where people can go and have internet access primarily, but also computers, etc., to help them revise ahead of their GCSEs and A-levels. Now, when you mix that together with now the two that are already up and running and seeing huge demand are in Warrington and Oldham. So Warrington's in Cheshire and Oldham is in East Lancashire. And they're seeing huge demand because people not being able to afford internet, not having access to computers, etc. Which, with if you remember, there was a huge issue with that during the pandemic, and but yet not being sorted. And the thing is you see that together with the need of food banks, the need of warm banks, which a lot of these are in these warm banks as well. In reality, now in a lot of our communities, it's the only banking we're actually seeing. Now, the banking that the mainstream media tends to talk about are not the banks that people are going to. They're the warm banks and food banks that they get an occasional mention every now and again, and it's just another sign of how broken how society has become. And yet, when the teachers are out on strike, all we ever hear about is, well, what about the impact on the kids' education? We never talk about the structural issues that affects their education every single day. But of course, it's not in the news at the moment because, of course, teachers aren't out on strike at the moment. In the same way, nurses, the amount of operations cancelled in the NHS this week isn't being reported because nurses aren't on strike. The mainstream media seem to have a very narrow view of what's important and when it's suddenly important.
Thank you so much. I mean, yes, of course, it's a big moment for children at the moment because the GCSE started this week. And yes, the digital poverty is a big issue for them. Thank you for raising that. Some lovely ones. Mia Mantri, my moment of the week. My paper was published in the British Journal of Social Work yesterday, entitled the dangers of not informing people of their rights. Well done, brilliant.
Can I just very quickly mention one thing as well? It was on this day in 2017 when Labour launched its manifesto. And just keep that in mind as we go through the rest of the show today.
Yes.
How different it could have been.
Well, sort of as if by magic, Leanne, my moment of the week was the announcement that Keir Starmer, that Labour are the real Conservatives. We didn't see that coming out. I think James is going to be expostulating about that later. Absolutely smashing. I'm going to make it sort of Mia Mantri, Howard, Paul and Laura. Paul is at a football match, so he's clearly feeling better. Laura is getting better slowly, and and we wish her well. Kirsty, moments of your week.
I have two. Am I allowed two? So can I have like a big one and a little one? So the big one was I went to my first.
Well, what is it?
Banners held high.
They always want two moments.
I know, we always want more.
It's horrific. Go on, yes, you can have two because you're new.
So I went to my first with banners held high over in Wakefield on Saturday. What a brilliant event. If you've not been, go. The atmosphere is just wonderful. It was lovely being around like-minded socialists where you're all on the same page. There was great entertainment, poets. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And I think the second one has got to be that the Conservatives are actually admitting that Brexit was a disaster. When you've got Moggs up there saying, well, yeah, it's been a disaster. I think a lot of us that were saying Brexit would be a disaster are feeling a little bit validated this week that we're actually getting it from those who were championing it from the beginning. So that was my two for this week. Thank you.
Well done. Braverman suggesting that sort of pensioners need to go out and start picking cabbages because we don't have enough workers sort of earn their bloody pensions. And sort of, I'm exaggerating there, people. Right, that. In fact, Jane, moment of your week.
So my moment of the week was an Open Democracy article about Afghan refugees who fled the Taliban. They've come to the UK back in 2021. As you can imagine, with the government as it is, rather than allow these people to settle into a community and start building lives, they've been temporarily housed in hotels for 2 years. Who wouldn't want to live in a small box room without your own, personal space? Anyway, they've now been given 3 months to vacate the hotels and the web link for Zoopla to sort themselves out with private accommodation. So these poor people, so we're talking about people who have literally lost everything because of their involvement with the British government in Iraq, because they helped the British government. They had to flee from the Taliban when the Taliban took over. They've lost their families, some of them. Their families have turned against them. They've lost their home country where they've lived. They've lost everything they had. They've lost their jobs. So they've come here and just tried to build a life. And they've been trying to find private rented accommodation. But as soon as the letting agents find out that they're refugees, they're finding that there's a stony silence and they hear nothing more. There was one man that was in the article who they'd interviewed, and he'd done 6-hour round trips to be able to find somewhere, and finally got it all sorted out. Then his wife and children had to go down to London to provide paperwork, and they thought they were across the hurdles and they'd got a place agreed, and then they handed over the letter saying that the council and Home Office would be providing the deposit, and the landlord decided it was too risky to rent to them because they might not be able to afford to pay their rent in the future, so they're back to square one. So you've got all these people been trying to find somewhere to live for 5 months now, and they've been given this 3-month deadline now for March, and they're just going to be forced out onto the streets and end up homeless as a punishment for being, stupid enough to help the British government. Why would you help Britain when we're going to treat you like that?
I mean, the worst thing about this, Jane, is that many of these people are immensely talented, resourceful, clever people who, if we only gave them a chance, would contribute in spades to our society and our country, and never understand them. These are the people with get up and go. These immigrants. These are people who are so dynamic that they'll come across I'm not talking about the Afghan refugees, of course, but they'll come across the channel in a rubber boat to get here. They're just wanting the opportunity. And you can't work, and they've been treated appallingly.
It is, yeah. Sorry, John, I know I should wrap up now, but it's just the ridiculousness of our housing system in this country. They couldn't have done things, the government, in a more expensive way, putting these people in hotels. They couldn't have done it in a more unpleasant way for the people, because it might sound glamorous being in a hotel, but when you're trying to live in a hotel, it is not nice. It's not pleasant in any way. And if this ideological obsession with not providing safe, affordable housing for people at whatever cost to society, and extends out amongst people born in this country and refugees, anyone, they don't care who they hurt, whose lives are damaged by this, as long as they get to drive through this ridiculous ideology.
Yes, it's wicked. One of my big things at the moment is that I'm not proud to be British. I'll be proud to be British when there's something to be proud of. But some things about being British where we need to be ashamed. And with that,
now it's time for the big story.
Big story, and I'm hoping that we get some clarity about it. Wasn't this weekend awash with conferences? We had the Conservative Democratic Organisation, what they? We had the National Conservative Conference. What are they? We had the Progressive Britain Conference. Have you heard of them before? And finally, we had, with banners held high, sort of where Kirsty has given us a sneak preview of that, so you can guess what its nature was. But nevertheless, you may not have heard of it before. So I thought we'd start off by just asking my guests, what's all these conferences? What are they about? What do they believe? And sort of what should we think of them? So let's start off. I'm going to start off with Kirsty. Let's start with the Conservative Democratic Organisation Conference, Kirsty. So tell us about that.
Well, I concentrated on conservative nationalism.
National Conservative.
Yeah,
tell us about them. They're very much the same beast.
You'd need 3 or 4 weeks to really dig down into what these little subgroups were all about. So I concentrated on conservatives. And you've got to think the MPs that were in there, we had Sarella Braverman talking, Michael Gove, Jacob Reed-Moss, Lee Anderson, John Hayes, Danny Kruger. So just by those names, you kind of know what type of conservative they're attracting. And the basis of it is, it seems to have stemmed from the American conservative, I can never say the word, evangelistic, have I said it right? Sector. So there's a big, that's the one. So there's a big mixture of politics and religion going on with this movement. A lot of their key speakers are coming from a foundation, when I looked back into it, called, bear me 1 second, the Edmund Burke Foundation are quite heavily involved with them. I'm guessing through funding and also think tanks. And quite interestingly, the chair of the National Conservatives this end is a guy called James Orne. I don't know if any of you caught the activists that jumped on stage yesterday and were trying to get what Nazism was out there, and totally got uncensored, which is hilarious because this group are all for free speech and freedoms and what have you. But when it came to an activist jumping on stage, it was actually their vice chairman that jumped up straight away to put a bit of a stranglehold in there. But these people are saying that they're highly religious and they've got great morals. Obviously, there wasn't a lot of the conference coming out. I caught a few little bits on Twitter yesterday and today. Yesterday was mostly about the activists that got thrown off stage. Today, I've been able to pick up a little bit more. There was a guy up on stage called Douglas Murray, I believe his name is. And he was actually saying along the lines of, we shouldn't be restricted with what we do in Britain and as a movement just because Germany messed up twice in a century. He actually said that Germany messed up twice in a century and got a laughter from the crowd. This was the worst thing, that they actually thought this was sort of a titillating joke, where he's saying, you know, that two of the biggest mass murders of what we've seen in the First and Second World War was a little bit of a mess up. Which made me think, are they looking to do the same thing but not as messy? Where is this group actually going? And through a sort of gender perspective as well, it's really worrying for us in Britain, I think, when they're pushing that it should be one man for one woman, and that marriage should be the root of a real good national sovereignty of a country, which is great. I've got nothing against marriages, but it's actually going against gay marriages. It's going against trans people. There was a lot of anti-trans rhetoric in there, a lot of homophobia in there, a lot of undertone racist, xenophobic in there. I mean, I think they're kind of dressing it up that this is a good thing by putting clergymen on the panel. They've got a guy called Benedict on the panel. So I sat and listened to a little YouTube clip of him, because there wasn't a lot going around, and the guy's doing fabulous work for what he sees is persecuted Catholics and Christians around the world, and that they're still persecuted against. And he went into deeply about what he'd been doing in Syria, in the Middle East, and how terrible it was because ISIS and Islam and that were this terrible force on Christians and Catholics. But what's interesting is he was part of sort of the Trump movement, has been spending a lot of time in America alongside these people that have worked with Trump. And I'm sat there questioning why he isn't speaking for the Christians and Catholics on the Mexican border that are being exactly the same, are being, driven out of the country and persecuted. He didn't seem to have a lot to say about these Catholics and Christians. It was just ones that were facing the enemy of Islam. So it was real, xenophobic rhetoric in there, and wanting to bring things back and making Britain great. But they couldn't actually tell us what was great about Britain and preserving our history. But it was as if they were cherry picking parts of the history that make us look great, of what we've done to civilize the rest of the world, but didn't actually want to talk about the horrors that we did along the way. And the women on there don't even get this started. The Marxist feminist in me has been dying all afternoon. I think I said to you earlier, didn't I? I need a gin after listening to these. So they're coming across as feminists that are worried about the woman's mental load. Feminists know about this. We've got it all now. We can work and we can have families, but we're struggling with the workload. And a lot of feminists say we've done ourselves some misjustice here because we've given ourselves more work. And sections of this panel are saying we need to go back to traditional values. I mean, one's suggesting that women need 40 days of rest after pregnancy, after giving birth. They should have 40 days of rest. And her solution to who would care for them is other women take time off work and come round and care for the person who's just had a baby. So we're not actually looking at structural issues where, our services aren't meeting our needs. We're just shoving all this work back onto women through our caring responsibilities. So it's a real crazy old scene in there for some of the ideas. They're dead against giving birth control to they were saying how terrible it was that 14 and 15-year-old girls are on the pill. But in the same breath, they're also saying that teenage pregnancy is awful and unmarried women are awful and we should be striving. There just seems to be loads of contradictions within this movement where they're stating that they stand for one thing.
That's just sort of very reminiscent of the Trump movement in America, which of course it's hoping to parrot. Yeah. How worried, just briefly, how worried do we need to be about this? It's sort of...
I find it worrying because what they are doing is using rhetoric that possibly working class people would fall into. So worries about migration and housing and our services, that there isn't enough to go around, but they're not actually stating that capitalism is the problem to this. They don't mention capitalism at all, which is really strange for the ideology that they're in. They don't want to accept that capitalism has failed and that our services need money. I think that's worrying. And also, if we're looking at sort of what's going on in America and the influence that these American, there's speech writers of Trump in there, there's people that have been around in the scenes. When we look at, abortion laws changing over in America, and how women could be criminalised for wanting something as simple as an abortion. So I think we should be worried.
Thank you so much. Yes, that was really clear and helpful. Thank you, Kirsty. Now, the other conference, sort of the Conservative Democratic Organisation, they're the same thing, very anti-woke, very family values, sort of protect the children, censorship of schooling and all these kinds of things. But they're focusing on sort of constitutional changes to the Conservative Party, but sort of within this same framework, basically trying to just take over the governmental lobby group. I want to move on now, though. Jane, the Progressive Britain Conference, that sounds very ominous. Tell us all about that.
So this was a conference of mainly Labour voices, I'd say, mainly what we'd all view as the Labour right, discussing issues that are important to the country. Keir Starmer gave a big speech there. There were other people. I think Darren Jones, who was very good grilling the Royal Mail bosses recently. So I haven't had a chance. I haven't been able to find exactly what he said, but I would have thought that his bit was probably quite good, speaking about economic growth. But I did find elements of Starmer's speech quite concerning. So it was very light on policy, as you would expect. Lots of theoretical things, that you wouldn't, things that aren't, setting out a policy that they're going to have to stick to. It was quite good to hear that Wes Streeting did say that a privatised NHS would happen over his dead body, I think were his exact words. So I think that was comforting.
I interrupt you there. I mean, the point that I always make is that nobody's going to privatise the NHS. The Tories aren't going to privatise the NHS in the sense of an American privatised system. What we are frightened about on the left is not the privatisation of the NHS, but the outsourcing of the NHS, which is basically what we did with COVID, but we just hand over huge billions of taxpayers' money to private firms to actually provide the services within an NHS, which is free at the point of charge. That's what we're worried about. I found, just going back to what you were saying about Starmer, I found Starmer's speech absolute vacuous nonsense. I mean, what do you think about it?
Those are the words I was struggling to find. I'm really finding it hard to be excited about anything that he said, but I did find some elements just very alarming. The repeated focus on working people, and it's this phrase, not working class people, not the 99%.
He said working people 24 times in a 19-minute speech, which included a minute of clapping at the beginning. Sort of we got to be the party of working people. We have to serve working people. We mustn't patronise working people, but we have to lead working people. We have to stand by working people. My God, what rubbish! Carry on. Sorry, you've got me going, Jane. You just shut up.
Well, it's difficult not to get wound up when you hear him talking, I have to say. But he did say working people's need for stability, for order, and for security are a big focus. So I found that quite unpleasant, actually. Stability, order, and security. So we do need those things, but that's a very narrow focus. What about apart from the fact that the focus again is on working people, what about the significant contribution made by people to society who aren't able or aren't in paid employment? But what about the right for working people and people who aren't or can't work for the right to education, to freedom of thought and freedom of expression, which are very quite alien concepts to the narrow focus that he's pinpointed there. And then when you look at the authoritarian nature of the anti-democratic crackdown within the Labour Party and the attacks on freedom of thought within the Labour Party since Keir Starmer took over as leader, that really alarms me. And when you look also at the recent complete lack of fight that was put up against the very authoritarian laws that are being put through by this government, that made me quite worried. And the constant repetition of the concept that Labour's changing based upon this, malicious lie that Labour under Jeremy Corbyn was something very bad, and they're trying to cleanse the party of that badness and move on to be something better. And the speak of giving people hope, which really frustrated me because there was a huge amount of hope between 2015 and 2019, and Keir Starmer has stamped on that harder than anyone else I can think of. He's absolutely decimated the hope of, I would say, hundreds of thousands of people. So to talk of trying to raise hope now without actually any policies or any plan that's going to improve people's lives, I thought was quite rich. So it wasn't. I'm glad I didn't go, is what I'll say.
Thank you. Yes, I thought it was interesting that he was talking to a progressive Britain conference, trying to tell them that we need to be more conservative in our policies. We need to offer stability as well as change, which is important. Finally, Neil, sort of raise the tone, Neil. We're just dealing with awful people who are just. By the way, I don't know whether you listened to Priti Patel's speech, but the first Priti Patel at the Conservative Democratic Organisation conference, she talked for about the same length of time, and until the last 5 minutes when she went off on one, which was very much sort of Trumpism, sort of you couldn't tell the difference between what she was saying and what Stan was saying. The need to gel with the grassroots, the need to listen to people, the need that there's the importance of grassroots workers and all this rubbish. Right, okay, Neil, raise our spirits a little bit. Tell us about with banners held high.
I will do in a second. There's an important point we need to make about these conferences, in particular this national conservatism one, which sounds incredible as though it's from the 1930s Germany, doesn't it? The thing that's important is that these groups act as outriders to groups like the Tory Party, who will put ideas out that the Tory Party would never accept right now because it wouldn't be a vote winner for them. But they ease them in bit by bit, like what happened with Brexit, a bit like that kind of thing. And that's why they are dangerous. And a quick point about the Labour Party shifting more and more to the right. Did you see the stage at last year's Labour Party conference in Liverpool? I walked in there and I honestly thought I was at Britain First rally. I walked back out thinking I went into the wrong hall. I honestly did. And then a local MP to me bumped into me and said, "Oh, how do you think it's going?" I said, "How do you think it's what's going?" "Oh, the conference." And I said, "Well, it looks like a BNP rally, doesn't it?" And she turned around and walked off. She didn't like the
Oh no, we got to be patriotic in the Labour Party now.
Oh yeah.
Tell us about with banners held high.
Yeah, with banners held high happened, which is the biggest trade union march with banners and flags and everything like that in the north of England, in particular in the Wakefield area every year. Now, it's normally a lot bigger than it is, but this year there was rail strikes that were impacting it. And thankfully, people's solidarity with the RMT was stronger than they need to be in Wakefield this year. So that was good. But still, there was a good, I'd say about 3,000-4,000 that turned up. Marched through the streets, handing out leaflets, chanting, music. We had a pipe band, which by the end of the march, they still haven't got the bagpipes in tune yet, sadly. but they also had.
Are my pipes ever in tune?
No, no. In fact, I think it was what the Scottish people did. Was that they thought, you see, if we play them slightly out of tune, it'll piss the English off, won't it? Talk to the guitars and the pianos. So we'll do that. That'll get them back for Bannockburn all those years ago.
We'll be in trouble. We'll be in trouble.
You're not quite wrong there. Just to jump in, you're not quite there, Neil. They were used as battle cries against the English back in the day. So you're not wrong there. They were used for that.
Yeah, but the problem was it annoyed the English and got them ready to battle far more than it did the Scottish. That was the problem. It didn't really work as an idea. But anyway, and now they're used to try and annoy tourists in London. So hey ho. But anyway, there was also the PCS drummers, the PCS Samba band there in the middle of it as well, who were fantastic at providing beat.
Before we move on, Neil, I'm sorry, I'm pushing the thing along.
There was very good, plenty of speeches from the likes of Richard Bergen was there. Trying to think who else was there now. Karen Ray, the regional secretary of Unite the Union, and various other speakers, and Joe Solo gave an amazing performance and poem as well.
Just thank you so much. God bless you, and thank you for forgiving me for being so rude to you all. One thing that struck me before I leave you and move on to the other stories was that Conservative Democratic Organisation Conference, 200, if that, sort of minimal numbers at the other two conferences. 3,000 people on a reduced with banners held high. So much more populist, so much more based in working people, sort of. And why is it, Neil, that these other conferences have such an impact and the effect and power on our government and what happens in government? And this huge rally, it only got mentioned in one newspaper that I could find, and that was the Socialist Worker.
Whoa. We've covered it quite a lot in the Morning Star.
Morning Star, got the name wrong. But sort of, it might have been in the Socialist Worker as well, but it was sort of, why are these lobby groups so much more important in what happens than what people clearly support and want in the rally that you were at?
Money.
Because
All of these cranks I've been looking at today, they've all got a hand in a greasy pot somewhere. That's my idea anyway. I think it's all money.
The reason is it doesn't speak to the agenda of the establishment. That's the reason. Whereas what they speak about at these national racist conventions and stuff like that they have does speak to their agenda, and that's why they get far more coverage.
Thank you. Both correct. Thank you so much for those details. What a fabulous little section. I loved that. And sorry I intervened more than I should have done. Let's move on. We're running out of time already. Laura Daly corrects us. The Durham Miners Gala is the biggest.
Not in the Wakefield area, it's not.
It's not biggest in the Wakefield area, Laura. Sort of, you can fall out and when Laura's...
No. You see, where the warm-up act for Durham Miners Gala, and everyone get up there for July. It's important.
It is. Major importance. Right, Trump. Jane, is Trump done for?
So unfortunately, I think that he's not. I was reading John Smith's How His Last Stand blog this evening, and he made some really good points that feed into some other things we've already mentioned tonight about the media and the fact that he feels that the media will help Trump to give him a platform and get him elected, because firstly, it's more profitable for them if they have, this big dopey president doing outrageous things. That's lots of headlines for them, and lots of people reading their newspapers, watching their news programs. So personal greed, and then it just feeds into that agenda, the media using refugees to rattle people who've been affected by the cost of living crisis, pointing a finger to distract from the people who are really responsible at the top of it all by blaming and scapegoating other more vulnerable people. And he pointed out too that it's very easy for anger over lives that have been stalled, he said, by crony capitalism to be easily manipulated by libertarians promising fewer taxes and more freedoms for gun ownership. Really simple things to offer. It won't be the working classes taxes that are lower, but all they had to say is lower taxes at the time. And, you know, they can manipulate people's fears and suffering for their own agenda. But also, I think there's a problem with the alternative or the lack of an alternative. So obviously the Democratic Party, or I feel under Joe Biden, is much better than the Republican Party under Trump. However, they're not inspiring a lot of hope in people. I think although the Democrats in America have done a much better job of not persecuting the left, as the Labour Party in this country is doing, and they are working with progressives, the opinion polls are not looking great for Joe Biden right now. He's going to be, is it 84 or 86 at the end of this next term if he does become president? So I think it's just very sad that on both sides of this, the two main parties, and again, you've got the situation where you don't, of all the millions of people in America, and all the millions of ideas and the energy, there's two choices basically. And within those two choices, you can choose one very old man who's been at the top of that pile for a long time and, you know, doesn't really offer anything to help people in the struggles they're facing day to day. So what do people do? And they feel disenfranchised and they turn away altogether, or they get manipulated by these darker forces who are all too eager to manipulate people for their own ends. So I don't think that he is finished
Jane,
with.
I mean, he's been found guilty of rape, hasn't he? Or sexual assault.
This was Rees-Mogg, didn't he? Had making an absolutely appalling statement the other day saying he's not being found guilty of rape, it's only sexual assault and battery. I mean, the audacity of the man, it's only. Yes, he's been found guilty of some really disgusting things, and there are more charges against him from other people. I'm not sure if they're in the same nature necessarily. There's different kinds of charges against him pending, but from what I was reading there, and he seemed to have increased his popularity and a narrative that he's building where, you know, the election was rigged, they're lying to you. And now the statements that he's making around the judiciary, you know, that, you know, not that people are thinking, oh, well, he did these things, it's good, but people are thinking the establishment's got it in for him. You know, they've rigged these court cases, he's not really guilty. And that's quite a powerful thing. So that's very worrying too, because that lack of trust in the law, in the justice system, although there are huge miscarriages of justice, I'm not sure that he's been a victim of them. And this is quite a dangerous rhetoric that he's spreading.
Yes, it's very concerning. Neil, as far as I can see it, the front runner against Trump, if Trump has been sufficiently damaged to not win the Republican nomination, we're going to get DeSantis, who's even worse. I mean, is this a case of out of the frying pan into the fire? No, you're muted, Neil. I'm glad because
I'm now mute about. No, I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. I don't actually know who he is. I've just done a very quick Google search as you've been speaking, and he's a member of the Republican Party. I've got no. The problem is that I mean, my view of it is similar to what Jane said. Is the only people who are really going to win out of the upcoming presidential elections are white entitled old men. But I can't comment on DeSantis because I'm really sorry I dropped the ball on that one. I didn't see it. I didn't read up about him. But I've
DeSantis is the governor of Florida, and he's behind this very, very NatCon approach in sort of evangelical Christian family first, clamp down on LGBT plus, sort of censor the books that are going into schools to protect children and all the rest of it. It's that kind of line. So it's closely aligned to the right and certainly quite
and leaning towards the far right by the sound of it.
All of them are.
It's where's the alternative in all of this? It's I mean that's actually quite depressed me that you've either got an angry What's-it or him. It's depressing.
It's frightening, and
the whole thing about Donald Trump as well, and the civil case brought against him, where it was a defamation case, from what I understand, where he defamed someone over after they made claims that he sexually assaulted them. This is a man who boasted about being able to grab women by certain parts. I mean, this is not a man who thinks like like a man, quite frankly. It's horrific. And to find that if he doesn't get through, it'll be someone who is even worse, is even more horrific.
I mean, I say this almost every week. It flabbergasts me. People, Johnson is the same, and we had the Conservative Democratic Organisation conference was mainly about let's bring back Johnson, and people just say, oh, what is he like, to these horrific things, and we've just got an electorate which just elects evil liars, and it's horrific. Kirsty, let's go back to America. What's the problem? I've just outlined it. What, in your view, is the problem, and what is the solution?
Well, we're getting into populist, politics, aren't we? And we've seen this since the Blair years, where everything had to look good, and politicians have become kind of like a consumer product of whether you're going to buy into how this product looks and how it sounds. And I think the issue that we're facing is it's the same in America. I would assume. I know their unions, the number of unions are going down over in America as well, aren't the actual members of unions is going down, much the same as what we've got here. And of course, it's all about money, and keeping business happy. And this is the same issue that America's going to have than what we have, is that we have politicians that have to keep businessmen and those at the top happy, but that doesn't actually gel with those at the bottom. And then we get this big void where people like Trump can kind of hoodwink the public that he's like them. He actually spoke out to working class people about the problems that they were facing and were relatable, even though this guy has got nothing in common with any working class person. So I think the solution is we need to get normal people into politics, normal working class people into politics, and do it in a way where they don't become seduced by the money at the top.
Yes.
And we had that, and we lost that.
It's Westminster, isn't it? It just corrupts people. Westminster.
Can I just correct the record on something there? Trade union membership in the UK is actually on the rise and has been for a few years. It is on the decline in America, in the US, that is, but here in the UK, it is actually on the rise.
I stand corrected. Thank you very much, Neil.
Just a couple of points. Jacqueline Hemmings points out that DeSantis is trying to protect children by not letting them read books, but he doesn't go as far as saying let's ban assault weapons that he used to mass murder them in schools. And she also says there seems to be an upsurge in misogyny lately, and she's disappointed that some women are quite happy to be complicit in that misogyny. I find the same thing as well with immigration, that you get Suella Braverman telling people that it's okay to worry about immigrations, even though you're an immigrant, and and that immigrants need to fit in with British values, whatever they may be, and you just think, this is horrific, Okay, last question. Very recently, there's been an upsurge in scurvy, we're told. I mean, this was something you used to get on ships in the 18th century. They know how to cure it. It's limes, which is why we're called limeys, by the way, because our sailors used to eat fresh limes to stop themselves getting scurvy. And scurvy's making it come back. Neil, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, after 13 years of Tory rule, we're having the Victorian greatest hits at the moment, aren't we? Scurvy, which is a deficiency of vitamin C, which can give you many lifelong conditions and can even be fatal. And it's you are right; it goes back as far as the 14th century, where sailors were believed to have it. So that's how far we're going back here. But in the ONS have released, the Office for National Statistics have released figures showing that people with scurvy and also has doubled in the last year. I think it was 2 years, but it's doubled in recent times anyway. Up by from what it was to double what it is now. Sorry, I forgot to make a note of the numbers. Apologies. But it's over 1,000 cases last year that was diagnosed. And just to remind you again, we're the 6th richest country in the world. And also there's the rate of people being admitted into hospital for malnutrition has also doubled upon figures from 2010 as well. Now, how have we got here? How have we got here? I mean, the fact that we're having is that the quality of food is going down because, of course, more nutrients you put into food, it costs a lot more money. It's easier to fill it with chemicals instead. That's going to make you feel full rather than actually give you anything to live on. And then, of course, people's wages have stagnated or even in real terms gone down, so they can't afford the food. They go to the supermarket, the food has gone up, by huge amounts for some. The most basic lines have seen the biggest increase in food. And by the way, Tesco, for example, which has recorded profits of £1 billion in the last year. Just as a side issue to this, something I want to mention. I went to Tesco the other day to buy something, a food item, and it was £2.50, but I had a little label next to it and said, if you've got a club card, it's £1.50. So I went to the till and said, sorry, I haven't got a club card, but can I have it for £1.50? Oh, no, you can't, it's £2.50 because you don't have a card. I said, but you can afford to sell it at £1.50. So why are you making me pay £2.50 unless I have a card that enables you to harvest data from me? So, and that shows a profiteering that we have. And it's blatant and it's in front of us. But apparently, Rishi Sunak needed a conference today to try to work out where this profiteering is happening. Because you got to remember, this is a guy who can't use a credit card when he goes to buy fuel. So no wonder he needs a conference to work out where it is. But anyway, I digress. This is all linked to profiteering. And then not only that as well. So you've got people that have got scurvy, malnutrition, which then leads to fatigue and things like that, as does scurvy as well. But then also today, buried within the figures for the unemployment figures that were announced, there's also been a huge increase in workplace illness. People off work for long-term illnesses due to the report said from the figures from the ONS again was saying it's mainly a result of mental illness and also musculoskeletal problems, so people bad neck, bad backs, etc., which they said they presume it's down to people working from home. Nobody seems to see this all together. What we are seeing here is the effect of 10 years of wage stagnation and rampant profiteering. This is what we are now seeing, is people, like I said earlier on, this goes full circle to what I said at the beginning of the show, that actually, the only banks that are in our communities now are not NatWest, HSBC, they've gone, they've left. It's food banks, warm banks, etc. And food banks often don't give the most nutritious food because they don't get it to give it out. And when they do, they have to limit it to who it can go to. So, you know, there's a problem here where people are getting food, but not particularly nutritious food. And
Thank
that's
you.
leading to this. And you know, for God's sake, I mean, it's like, you know, what this is, it's not a symptom of more people being ill, but it is. But it's actually a symptom of, well, it's the symptom is people getting ill. The cause is a breakdown in society that's happening through many other different sources. And another very quick little thing
Yes.
was that actually the HSE isn't carrying out nearly as much safety inspections of workplaces, which, as I said about people being off work with multiple skeletal problems because maybe not sitting right at work, etc. Because some people working from home. If you're working from home, it is your workplace. If you're injured or hurt at home, your employer must report it to the HSE through the RIDDOR regulations. But yet the HSE are carrying out the lowest inspections they've ever carried out. And again, that's as a direct result of austerity. That's why we're where we are.
I mean, what you've said was just amazingly important, and I'm so sorry to cut you short there. Thank you very much indeed. But we're just about to finish the show, and I just want the comments from Kirsty and Jane. I mean, Kirsty, have you got anything to add to that? I mean, is the answer just more money? Is that
No, it isn't, Mum. We've got to look at where our supermarkets are built. I don't know about your end, but my end, the supermarkets where you can get cheap deals are on industrial estates. If you haven't got transport to get there daily to get your fresh fruit and vegetable, that's a problem. I think as well, the damage in our NHS with waiting times. It's so funny when you said malnutrition. I was actually suffering from malnutrition because I've got a health issue that was missed by the NHS, and I was so long waiting for a follow-up appointment. So it's also that we've got to look at the infrastructures around where we get our food, how we get it, how cheaply we can get it, and how quickly we can get healthcare. I think it's there's a lot to go at on that one. It's just not as simple as, you know, knowing what right food to have and how to cook properly. It's too simplistic.
Thank you so very much. I mean, when I started teaching, the lessons were all geared around how to cook a nutritious meal cheaply, and they changed that, as I said, during my career, and domestic science became food something or other.
Food technology.
Food technology, and it was all about how do you lay on the food for a party, and what food would you have at a party, and sort of I've always wondered whether it's just sort of how we've changed our emphasis as well as a society, and but I feel bad for saying that because it's clearly about the infrastructure of society and access to food. And one of the things that Neil is saying, food banks can't provide certain foods to people because they can't cook it in the oven when they get it home either. Last question to Jane. I mean, are we just a declining country that's going down the drain? This is basically the question. What the hell happens here, Jane? Just to finish this off.
So this isn't inevitable. This is by choices, conscious choices that the people who lead us are making, and we can make different choices. So we just need to do everything we can to put pressure whilst they're still in power for them to make better choices. There are lots of good organisations out there that, you know, you can try and share their posts on social media. It sounds like a cliche, but it's you know, frustrating that there's so little you can do. And I think we need to look to more progressive forces. There are the Greens, Green Party have got some good policies. They're not going to fix everything, but they did really well. They've increased in their size so much over the last 2 local elections. And Caroline Lucas does amazing things in the House of Commons, and their Lords, Natalie Bennett and Jenny Jones, do really good things in the House of Lords. So and there's new parties like the Breakthrough Party. It's frustrating because we want that progressive government, and I'm not sure we're going to get it anytime soon, but I think we've just got to look to where we can put pressure on and do our best to do that.
You're just all wonderful. I'm going to mention Jacqueline Hemming's comments. She wonders whether the long hours that people are working mean that they're just grabbing food, any old food. It's all fast food because you're really just so busy. she questions school meals. When I started teaching, the lady who ran the school meals for County Durham said that their aim was to provide meals of such quality nutritionally that children could, as long as they had enough to eat during the school holidays, they would still grow up strong and healthy. And of course, that was what the milk was meant to help with as well, the school milk that Thatcher stole. And so
Can I just make a quick shout out, please? Ed Byrne, not Ed Byrne. I've forgotten his first
Liam
name.
Byrne at Liverpool.
The who? Sorry.
Is it not Liam Byrne at Liverpool?
It is. Yeah. Sorry, Ed Byrne's a comedian. Sorry. He's got his the politician, not the comedian, has got a campaign for the right to food, which includes having all children having free school meals. Look it up. Sign up to it. Come on, we can do this.
Thank you.
When the Labour Party are talking about security, we need food security, not military security.
Absolutely spot on. Thank you for flagging that. She finally wonders whether fresh fruit and veg isn't lasting as long as it used to. Is it going to sort of? I find the exact opposite, that it's packed so full with chemicals, it lasts frighteningly long sometimes.
Longer than a prime minister.
Okay. Lettuce, certainly. You have been wonderful today. I don't know whether you've enjoyed yourself, but I've enjoyed myself tremendously. And I hope that you listening live and listening on the podcast have found it interesting as well. My golly, it's been smashing, hasn't it? A cauldron of interesting things. So I'm going to bring the thing to a close now by saying goodbye to my guests. Kirsty, great starter. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You. Neil, unbelievable comments. Thank you so much. Really love it when you get up on the rant, though I can't stop you talking. and Jane, as always, such insightful comments. God bless you. God bless you. Thank you for your comments on everybody online. Don't forget to sign up for Socialist Think Tank if you can. Don't forget to buy their products online. There's a shop and they do some exciting things to wear. Socialist Think Tank hoodies are the order of the day, I do understand. And finally, if you want to help this organization continue to grow, you're welcome to donate if you want. We're going to see you next week, next Tuesday at 9 p.m. every week, and hopefully we'll have a daily back as well that time, so it'll be a great week all round. Thank you, my guests. Goodbye to you. Goodbye, everybody.
Keep the red flag flying here.